Our team has a ton of fun, don't they? But isn't it true when you look at someone's eyes, not in judgment, but just to discover or to learn that you do discover a lot about them and their situation? I mean, they say the eyes are the window to the soul. My dad was a pastor for 30 years, and he counseled many couples on the brink of divorce and splitting up and people just beginning their journey together. And he would tell me I would learn a lot by looking at the wife's eyes. Was there weariness, exhaustion, worn out in her eyes, or was there hope and a light or a twinkle in her eye? My dad said, Ryan, look at your grandma's eyes, and when she interacts with grandpa, and if you take time and just focus on her eyes, you'll see that she has a twinkle, a light in her eyes. And when you look at your mom, you'll see she has a joyous light in her eyes when she is with me. He said, Ryan, you should be the type of man, the type of husband that your wife has light in her eyes. It's like, yeah, I want to be that type of husband. And so leading up to this message, I was like, okay, I got to see if Marie has light in her eyes. So I kind of get in and look, but not too obvious, because, then she always knows my thoughts anyway. But I get in and look, and then I'm looking, is there a light in her eyes? And I go, whoosh, and whoosh. And I'm like, oh, yeah, there's light in there. But I also discovered how often she rolls her eyes at me. And I hope the saying is true that, behind every successful husband is a wife rolling her eyes. But I love my wife. I am so proud of my wife, and I try to let her know that. And isn't that what we want as humans? We want this connection. We want intimacy. We want this relationship. And today we're going to look in week 3 of our series that when we make people objects, that it shatters and breaks that connection that we have with people. And so I have a story about 2 objects, a watch and a comb. So there's this really poor man, and he was getting ready for work, and his wife came out to send him out of the door, and she has beautiful long hair, and she came up to him and asked, do we have enough money? Could you buy me a comb? My hair's getting long, it's getting tangled up, and I just want to look presentable in public. And with sorrow in his eyes, he looked at his wife and said, we just don't have money right now. My watch that used to be my grandpa's that he gave to my dad that he's given to me, the leather strap on it is busted and broken, and I haven't even had money to buy a new strap. So the wife didn't ask for any more, just kind of let that go. And he goes to work, and on the way home from work, he passes a watch store, and he gets this brilliant idea, and he goes in and sells the watch for a lower price than it actually is because it's broken, and he gets money, and then he goes to a store and buys a comb for his wife. And he's excited, and he's about to enter the door. He's holding the comb in his hand, and just kind of whistling along, and he opens the door, steps in with the comb in his hand, and to his surprise, his wife now has short hair. And in her hand, she has a leather strap for the watch. So she cut her hair, sold her hair, and bought a leather strap watch for his watch. And they look at each other, and they just drop their items. And tears start going down their face, and they run together, and they hug, and they embrace each other, and they realize those things are just objects, that they are far more valuable as each other. Now, I think basic communication could have solved a lot of these issues here, problems, which is a whole nother thing to talk about. But isn't this what we long for? Just this intimacy, this connection, this relationship. And And you see, what we do sometimes is that we either dehumanize people and make them on the level of objects, or we elevate objects and put them on the same level as humans. Phones are the worst for that we find connections with our phone even though there's people and family and friends right around us. And so Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount is all about this unity. And again, he's speaking about relational wisdom, and that he wants us to live our best life, the best way to live. And as we will see, the best way to live is to treat people as human. And we're kind of in this big picture scene right now of this you have heard it said, but I say. And last week we looked at contempt, that we shouldn't dehumanize people, because when we dehumanize someone, it leads to a path of so many evils. And usually it starts with dehumanizing and contempt. And then today we're going to talk about lust, that we shouldn't make people objects to be used. And so when you abuse people, that is when you have already in your mind with contempt dehumanized someone, and then you start viewing them and seeing them in such a way that they become an object. When you treat someone like an object, you use and abuse them, you know what it does to you? It makes you numb to real connection and intimacy. It makes you numb. It is like a lens where the color fades and then you just get black and white. It is this numbing where you treat them as an object, and actually eventually you start becoming an object yourself because you become so desensitized to human connection that you can't touch or be touched by other people. So Jesus is explaining that we want to bring out this true life, this true relationship, and it starts off as a rule, and Jesus is going to go deeper into a principle and something bigger and something more than just a rule drawn up in the sand. And he says in Luke 5:27, "You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery." You see, in that time, the Pharisees and the scribes, they were the best of the best. They loved rules. And the truth is, we actually really like rules too. But they followed the rules, and they were more concerned with their reputation than their integrity. They were more concerned with reputation of what other people thought about them, to make sure that they were doing the right thing at the right time so other people saw them and thought of them as worthy and good and righteous. But actually, we should be more concerned with integrity, that no matter if someone's watching or not, that I'm going to do the right thing, and that it's the core of who I am that bubbles out into my actions of what I do. And if we're honest, we really love rules too, and we love rules for two reasons. One is because it shows us how to win. I love winning. I hate losing. And it shows us how to win, that we can draw a line in the sand right there, and if I don't cross that line, I'm winning. But it also spirals into this contentment of dehumanizing people, because you and that person and them over there, they've crossed the line and they've messed up, and I am better than them, and I can look down on them now because of this rule that is in place. And that is completely not the reason or the purpose of a rule. And Jesus said, I have come not to abolish or get rid of the law, but to fulfill it and make it more and make it come alive. I've come to make it from being written in cold, hard stone, and I have come to write it into your soft, warm hearts that would flow from the inside out. And the second reason we like rules is because it tells us how we can win, but it also lets us be creative in our thinking and lets us find loopholes of how we can get around this system. And technically, so you use that word a lot when you start a loophole. technically, this word adultery only applies to people that are married or promised to be married. And it is only the action of someone that's promised to be married or engaged to have sex with someone other than their spouse. So technically, I'm not even married and I'm not even dating or engaged, so technically I can't even commit this type of adultery. So I'm fine. I can do whatever I want, hook up with whoever I want, be in whatever I treat anyone, use, abuse. It doesn't matter because until I get to engage, then I'll fix it. That's a loophole. You know what? But it's mutual. It's just bursts out of love, right? That we can be together and we want this together, but without commitment, that's a loophole and a lie. Or, I just want to use this and I want to go as far to the line as I can. And you know what? I haven't technically tapped my toe on the other side, so I'm okay, right? Loophole. And then we see that we can often make it a rule as well. That some of you here might be saying, in my deepest part of my heart, honestly, I don't really struggle with this that much. And if you're saying that, you're like, I don't even need to engage or listen to the rest of this sermon and the rest of this Sunday. You know what? We're making this back into a rule instead of the principle. And the question is, have you ever used or abused anyone else? Mothers, have you ever used your kids? You have to get that perfect picture or that video of them so that you can put them on social media so that it makes you look good as a mom and actually fills your insecurity as a mom. And what it does is using your kids. And do you see this relational connection that starts happening? You'll start getting a lens and seeing them as when's the next opportune moment to capture that. And then you see them as an object. And what happens is you miss out on amazing connection opportunities with your kids. So I actually just broke my number one rule of preaching: never tick off the moms. So let's go after the dads a little bit. So dads, do you ever use your kids, even in subtle ways? You know, there's always that dad in the stands who's just yelling for their kids at sports or wanting their kids to excel in music or sports or whatever facet that they thrive in. And there's that dad just yelling and yelling in the stands and rooting on their kids kind of, but really not. And something happens in the heart of that dad with their kid, and it changes from seeing them as a kid, and you start actually seeing their performance more than who they are as your son or your daughter. And you know what? Kids aren't stupid. They can very often figure out intentions of their parents. And then your kid starts to know, you know what, dad doesn't actually love me for who I am, but he really just cares how I perform and what I do. And then that puts up a barrier. Do you see how this connects? It puts up a barrier in your relationship there with that person, and it numbs the relationship a little bit. How do you, even in very subtle ways, use your friends or your family? Or so often it is in the workplace that bosses so often use and abuse their employees and just view them as a tool or a means to build up the company or build up their empire, and they just treat people as objects. We see when we do this that it numbs us to the real, authentic, intimate relationships that we really desperately desire and want. So Jesus is going to make it deeper into something that is beyond just a rule. And he says, but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So there's two ways to correctly interpret kind of this part. And the first is this man who looks at a woman with the intention of committing adultery. And so it doesn't mean, you go out in the world and you're just living life and you find just this person super attractive. There's nothing wrong with that. Or you have this deep desire within you that, I just want to get married. I want to have kids. I want to have a family. I want that. That is a very, very good desire. That is a good want. But we see this stair-step path down if we twist it from desire and actually we start desiring desire to want it, and then we start embracing it. And so you see someone attractive, and then you start embracing it, and you holding it, and you start thinking about it, and then what you do is you bring it close, and you start pushing everything else away, and you start embracing it, which leads to indulging in it, where you start just getting delight and joy and using someone as an object. And you start preparing it and getting it ready for enjoyment and getting ready for it like a dessert. And then you start fantasizing about it. And in your mind, by this time, your mind is so gone that you're just bringing in so many different things. And all you are working with in your mind is objects, not people. And when you get to this point, it continues to lead to action. And so Jesus is saying it's something deeper than just going right up to the line. It's this progression. So when desire starts getting to embracing it for self-pleasure, for selfishness, you've already committed adultery because it's this pathway that leads to adultery. And from the inner life, it flows out to the outer life. And the second way that this can be interpreted is if this man looks at a woman for the purpose of getting her to lust after him. And we see this a lot with our middle schoolers, high schoolers, especially with our young women, that I'll dress a certain way so that people look at me, that they lust after me, that I get attention. But when you do that, do you know the message you're sending to the world? You're saying, I'm not worthy of real love. Come and treat me like an object. Come and use me. Come and abuse me. This is all I am. And you are immensely more than an object. Do not treat yourself like an object. So we need to see this and have this whole process work together. And so Jesus is going in for something deeper. He's more concerned about who you are than what you did or didn't with this line. He's more concerned of who you are. And this next question is terrifying. What would you do if you could? And in the aspect of using people, what would you do if you could? In the aspect of abusing people, what would you do if you could, if you knew you wouldn't get caught? If you knew that the consequences wouldn't be that bad? If you knew you could get away with it, where would your heart run and lead you? You see, when the heart is ready, the action will occur as the occasion offers. So a thief is a thief. They do not steal every second of the day. But when an occasion occurs and there's a situation that has blossomed up for an opportunity to steal, a thief will steal. It will lead to action. And it's the same thing with lust in our lives. That when opportunity happens, if our heart is already so far down this trail and this step path down that it will lead to action. And isn't it true in our culture that so often we trade in real, authentic, pure love for lust? That lust is often disguised as love. I mean, you just look at TV shows, movies, commercials, news, our culture, it is all there. And this philosophy of, lust in the name of love is okay. It goes like this, I just have this passion of love to be with this person and they with me. And it's this passion that we have together and it's together, but you know what it actually is instead of a passion of love? It's a passion of lust. You see, because in that passion of lust, you let's get together, I need to get what I want, and I will use you as an object, and you can use me as an object, and we can both get what we want. But you are still using the person as an object. And you know what? And then you kind of just go your own ways. But love stays. Love is based on commitment. In the good times and the bad. In sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer, love stays. And we read these things in weddings, and this is the difference between love and lust. And once you go down the path so far into lust, it can completely numb you and disconnect you from real, authentic relationship. There's a crazy thing that has been happening where young men in their 20s who are married have been so desensitized by pornography, by lusting, by objectifying other women, that they can't even perform in bed with their wife. Because they're so desensitized. It's like one drink of one beer used to give you that buzz, but now you need two, but now you actually need four. Now you need a whole case to get that same feeling, and you become so desensitized. And the same thing with lust. And it creates this fractured brokenness, and you're trading in love for lust. And it was one of the worst trades you can make. But the thing is, there is hope. No matter how far you think you are down this path of using people, of abusing people, there is hope. And the crazy thing is that counselors, when they encounter couples like this, the solution is one, to detox the brain from just engulfing through your eyes the toxins of objectifying people. But the more important thing is they say you need to rehumanize your wife. Hug your wife just to be close. Hold your wife's hand. Take her on a date. Just be together and talk with each other. Re-engage and rehumanize your wife. And that from that can birth a new life, new joy, new connection, new relationship, and it can melt away the numbness that objectifying people has created. Jesus goes on very seriously, and he says, if your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. This is a crazy statement. And Jesus is saying, here, okay, so would it be a good trade to gouge out your eye, throw it away, if that made sure that you never used people, abused people, saw them as objects anymore? Would that be a good trade? Absolutely. That would be a great trade. But Jesus is also saying, even if you did that, would that solve the problem? Absolutely not. You still have another eye to lust with. You still have your mind to fantasize and lust with. Would this solve the problem? No. And so he's saying, even if you come at this with approach and don't even touch the inner life, but only focus on external behavioral modifications, is that going to solve it? And he's saying, no, it's like a river, the Mississippi River. This is Lake Itasca. Have any of you been to Lake Itasca? It's the birthplace of the Mississippi, and it's just a few steps and a skip and a hop, and you're right across the Mississippi River. And it flows out of Lake Itasca into this creek that ends up flowing all down across our nation. And the Mississippi is good water, brings life. But imagine if Lake Itasca at its source was rotten, just polluted, this tar-like water full of garbage and trash from what it has let in, and then that flows out through the Mississippi and it goes all the way down and it starts destroying and making decay along the whole path of the Mississippi. And you're like, I want to solve this problem. What if you built a dam right here across that connection, and you built it super high and super good? It's like gouging at your eye. I'm done with this. I'm going to throw it away. I want to be done with this. Would that solve the problem? It will really help for a short amount of time. The lake will start drying up, and that decay and filthy river will start dissipating a little bit. But over time, the streams and the Lake Itasca will be bubbling up with still that tarry, broken, disgusting, filthy water. And eventually it will go over the dam and flow over. It will find another route around and go through. So you see, Jesus is saying that you can't just do things externally to solve internal problems. You have to start on the inside and let it flow out. You have to go to the source, to the springs that are coming up into this lake that flow out. And if you try on the outside first, it won't transform what is on the inside. And so again, with a remarkable statement, Jesus is saying, if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose a part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Wow, doesn't that seem harsh? That seem kind of final? What Jesus is saying here is when you start dehumanizing people and you start thinking of them and viewing them and seeing them as objects, it will make you the most lonely person. It will numb you from real connection. And we often think the most lonely place is maybe me by myself in a room with no one around. That's not the most lonely place. The most lonely place is when you are surrounded by a lot of people, and they are happy and connecting and building relationship, and you are there, but you're so desensitized by making people objects that you start viewing everyone as an object, that you become an object, that you become numb, that you can't touch or be touched, that you are there and everyone else is connecting and you aren't. So the most lonely place is when you're surrounded by a lot of people and you are still alone. So it's saying if you continue down this path and don't turn to change your inner life, you'll continue down this path where you'll be the loneliest of persons. And you know what? You'll be the type of person that doesn't belong in heaven. Because heaven will be an intimate, worshiping, community thing all together. And you will be there with your hands down to the side, not connecting, not knowing anyone, and being utterly lonely. And you see, you won't even want to be there. You won't be the type of person that belongs in heaven. So how do you solve this? What is the solution? How do I actually transform the inner life? And the key is that you don't make it a rule, but you make it a principle, a thing that you live by that goes to the core, that goes to the roots of who you are. And so to succeed at keeping the law, to succeed at the rules, one must aim at something other and something more. One must aim to become the kind of person from whom deeds of the law naturally flow. You see, if we are a dead tree, we're going to produce none or rotten fruit. And the roots at the base are rotten and dead, and so nothing will flow out from that. And trying to keep the rule or the law is like trying to, have those plastic fruits and putting some tape on it and just taping them to these trees on the outside. It might show good for a little while, but it is fake and void and empty. But what God is calling us to is to be a vibrant tree where the roots are alive and life is given through the roots, up through the trunk, to the branches, to the leaves, and to the fruit that is being produced. And Jesus is saying, this is the life I want you to live. This is the way of wisdom. This is the way of life. This is the best way to live. And to live this way, you can't objectify other humans because it will destroy you. And so Jesus wants the best life for you. He wants the best life for me. But do you know who else wants us to live with deep intimacy, true connection? You know who is so desperate for it? The world. The world is so hungry and thirsty to see something that is authentic and real, and friendships and coworkers' relationships, and a marriage that is based on commitment and trust and healthy and that bears the good fruit. Because the world is trying. And they're filling this void with lust or running to other areas of their life and using and abusing people. And before this passage, Jesus says, I want you to be the salt to the world so that they could see it and that it would flavor and that they could taste it and they'd smile when they taste it and it would give taste and a new perspective. And by living a life of true connection and intimacy, you could be the salt to the world, to other people around you, and inspire, and that they could come to see Jesus in you and through you and praise him. And he says, I want you to be the light to the darkness, that you would be a light, that you would be pure, that you would be living in such a way that you could connect with people. And the light shines on darkness, and darkness is gone, and it shows and it brings out life in the daytime instead of nighttime. And people are so desperate to live not in the night, but in the day, and they don't know how. But we as an example together can be just a light and salt to the world through that. And so what are some steps we can take? And you see, Jesus is making this far more difficult than just a rule. He's making it a principle that goes to the core. A rule is on the exterior. So it's far more difficult to live the inner life. But what are a few next steps that we can take, that we can grow in, even just to build our awareness of how I might use and abuse people? And I encourage you this week to check out our devotionals. Find them on the website or the app, or there's some printouts on the Connection Center there that you can pick up and just go before God. And remember, Jesus is saying this is something deeper than just adultery. Adultery is the example that he's using in this case. The deeper heart issue is that we use people, that we abuse people, that we see them as objects. And often it's people right around us that we do that the most with. And so I encourage you to say, Lord, just help me to see little areas where I am using people, because I don't want to. I want real intimacy with those around me. And just bring to light and work through these questions. Maybe you are realizing, you know what? If I'm honest with myself, the hardest person to be honest with is yourself. You're like, you know what, I've been treating myself like an object, and that's not okay. Maybe you need to work and process through that and use these questions to help filter and guide you and lead you to conversations and thinking and journaling and whatever that may look like for you. Maybe lust right now in this season of your life is just out of control. It's like a wildfire that is taking and consuming you, and you need help. We have Celebrate Recovery. This is a community. This is not a program. This is a community of people that have hurts, habits, and hang-ups, and that are broken with you and want to walk with you and journey with you as we try to build up our inner life. And you see, the key is to build the inner life and try to transform your inner life, and also have some exterior modifications. And if those are happening at the same time, then you can get real, true life change. And this meets Tuesday nights. It's not something that starts and ends. It's always going. You can jump in at any moment. And then Peacemakers Seminar is coming up, and maybe you're like, you know what? When I get in arguments with people, when I start arguing and there's tension and there's conflict, then you know what? I just jump to I must win. I must conquer this argument. I must be the better person. I must win. And in that, you realize I start viewing the other person as an object, and I need to use them so I can get my argument and my way across. Maybe in love out of that person, you're like, I want to learn. I want more tools in my tool belt of how to communicate in the midst of conflict so I don't see people and use them and mistreat them. But you could come to this and see how you can use this to bring life. You see, Jesus, through this whole thing, he wants you to have life. And he didn't, it should be exciting and a thrill to live and be a follower of Jesus. You see, he didn't come and live and die and raise from the dead to save us in our sins. And he didn't do that just so that we could get into heaven, that we would limp through life just to get to heaven. He came so that he could save every area of our life, every space within inside of us, every nook and cranny, and truly transform who we are. He came to transform us so that we would become the type of people that would thirst for righteousness, that would not even desire lust or want it, that would be so just consumed in him that we would see people and as humans, as his creation, and not want to objectify and use them and abuse them. He wants to come and transform every single area of our lives. And it's a journey, and it's thrilling, and we can improve and grow and bring our community into that as well. So I just encourage you to lean in and listen and try to live your best life. And Jesus is giving us wisdom of how to do that. Father, Lord, I just pray that you would continue to work on our minds and our hearts. Continue to speak to us. Lord, Holy Spirit, I pray that you would actually come and fill us completely and start working in our roots of transforming who we are, because it's a miracle that you transform us. And I pray for a miracle in each and every one of us, that we would be transformed more and more and more. And it doesn't mean that there'll be lots of ups and downs along the way. And Lord, I pray for those especially that have had deep wounds of being used and abused, that you could help them not to view themselves as an object, as someone else may have already viewed them as, but that you would redeem that and show them that they are beautiful, they are created in your image, that you love them, you have a plan for them, and you have more for them. Thank you that you have more for each and every one of us. So bless us today as we continue to worship, continue to grow together, and just continue to work on our minds and our hearts and our souls, and Jesus, it's all about you. Let us worship and glorify you right now. In Jesus' name, amen.